Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? The actual name of this panel is Back to Office. So are we ready? I don't know how many are back in office yet, or hybrid, remote, what we're doing, and what does that mean, right? So we have our two experts who will help us out and figure out what it means to get back into the office today. And based on that, just yesterday, I think a news came out that there are a lot of corporations that are just deciding that their workers are going to be fired if they're not coming back. Prior to that, workers were saying they're quietly quitting, right? So, David, tell me, what do you think offices, corporations need to do to their buildings to get the workers to want to come back in?
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. It's obviously not the easiest first question to kind of receive, right? So I'm going to answer this more broadly, and I think we'll get to the right place. I think big picture, everyone has to understand that what's happening in the office world just happened in the retail world, right? And people don't conceptualize that together, right? Because people don't, right? Because they think COVID. Now, what happened to office was Zoom. And what happened was things were expedited because of what happened with COVID, right? It was like basically the gas pedal that changed everything a lot quicker. While retail slowly evolved, office has needed to evolve much more quickly. So I think that's the background context. And what you're seeing is real time, real fast, those two parties trying to figure it out. Who's going to win this battle, this tug of war, as office evolves in front of our eyes in a very short-term space? But we'll talk more about the details, but that's kind of the background.
Well, I guess we first need to define then what back to office is really meaning now. There's hybrid, there's remote, there's in office, but every company kind of has even a different definition for what that means. Rebecca, what are you kind of hearing from people as to what that is meaning to them?
Well, first, I think just telling people to come back to work is really tone deaf. And I think any management team, if you manage a team, if you're simply saying come back to work, you're not listening to actually what's been happening in the talent landscape over the last couple of years, which is millions and millions of people have been working from home. And look what happened to the economy. The economy did great. So if you want your employees to come back to the office, you have to give them a reason. Why? Why should they come back to the office? What are they going to get differently than they get at home? And I think we've all learned that there's certain things about working from home that we really like. A time to deep think, a time to, you don't have to commute. You maybe don't have to think about what you're going to wear. You can balance your other hobbies or family or other priorities in your life. But I also think there are things people miss about being in the office. The collaboration, training, the social part. And so I would encourage you when you're thinking about a hybrid strategy, a return to work strategy, whatever definition, if you're managing a team or a culture, think about what you want out of your employer, being in an employer. Be really deliberate about your strategy. Just saying hybrid randomly or just saying I want this day or that day or all 5 days, it's too random and unstructured, and people will know that, and that's why they're quietly quitting or whatever the term is. So be really deliberate. We want people in the office on these days for this reason, and be deliberate about your strategy, and I think that will help people come back to work with more energy and enthusiasm.
I think that's true. Snacks help, right? Amenities in office buildings help. David, what kind of new amenities are offices putting in to attract their workers back? Make it better than home,
So to bring it up to real time, I think in answer to that, occupancy right now, as it's being measured in New York by Castle, it's a third-party company, is around 40-something%, right? Mid-40s%. Pre-pandemic, occupancy was around 70-something%. So it was never at 90 or 100 because of all the different reasons. People are sick, traveling, whatever that might be. So we need to keep that in mind, right, going forward. So the goal to bring people back to the office is not 100%. It's maybe somewhere in between 40 and 70. And I don't know the answer. But the way companies are looking at space now is very different to your end, and they're measuring the metric for occupancy now is more around the seat versus employee per square foot, right? So we're going to look at the seat, how much amenity space are we going to create for that seat, and then the utilization will come from there, right? So it's a different mindset. And when I say that, their companies are creating more collaborative areas. You know, this is all buzzwords we hear, but it's real, right? So we're seeing more of those collaborative. We need to make the office worth going to, and we're not going to the office to be in a office. We're going there to meet with our team. So with that in mind, they need to, and we're seeing a huge CapEx spend around reconfiguring existing spaces to get away from exterior offices and the sea of cubicles that we became accustomed to. Remember, they're like 10 people per 1,000, and it was like terrible, but like it was a great way to save money and it sounded cool and whatever. But now it's really about not densification, but about creating the more conference space, the touchdown spaces. And when you measure a seat doesn't mean a desk. A seat means a seat. So a seat could be in a conference room, a seat could be in a luncheon room, and so forth, because there's different places to work within an office, and I think that's the background behind what's going on.
Oh, let me ask this question then. How do employees feel about not actually having a desk, not a place when they go into work that they call their own, that they know no one else is sat at or anything, you know, that's clean and sanitized? Like, what are they doing for?
Well, I think the future of workspaces is that an office still exists that people can go to, but it is for a different reason than I need my own desk space, phone, computer portal. I believe that the future of work, and in terms of an office, is you go to a physical space to onboard, train, learn something from a team member, collaborate, have an all-company meeting, like getting together with small groups and working either for the social aspect or working to collaborate or working to create or working to learn. I think that is why people will gather in the future of the office space. And for that time that you need your own quiet, heads down workspace, that's where home is still a place where you can work remotely to do the deep thinking and the deep work. And that's where you have like that space that you call yours for the day-to-day work.
So regarding like company culture then,
Yep.
if we have staff that sometimes home, sometimes in the office, like, how do the people that are in office feel like, oh, so-and-so's working home again today? You know, I mean, you hear that. Is culture better now in the office, or has everybody just accepted that we are really working when we are home because we've proven we can do this?
Yeah. So I think culture is not defined by where my physical body is, but culture is really how we work together. And so the future of culture, too, is what does it mean to work here and work together and work on this team, regardless of where I am physically located. So it's about our values, how we make decisions, how we disagree. So when you define workplace culture, it needs to be able to exist virtually and in person. And so when I think about like being in office, you need to give people a reason to come into the office. And I can speak personally for my office. We've said that certain days are days we hope people come into the office, but people want to be there because they know other people will be there. We struggle to say come into the office on Tuesday when people would show up and then no one else would be there. They're like, why am I here? But when you show up on a Tuesday and your whole team is there and you can have lunch together, you can have in-person meetings, then you kind of feel that energy and let's start planting the seeds for culture that then you can take offline to continue.
And based on that too, you know, we said commute is sometimes the biggest deterrent for workers to go back into work. But there are a lot of co-working spaces now where companies meet. David, do you see a lot of that for the buildings that, you know, CBRE is hiring out?
So it's interesting. We've all seen the movies about, I guess, or TV shows about WeWork and everything that went wrong. But they got a lot right in the end, as it turns out right now. And if you look at occupancy in co-working / flex office space, what they're calling it now, that occupancy, WeWork just came out with their last quarter, was around 73%. That's the same as it was pre-pandemic. So what I said before was that office utilization's in the mid-40s, but it's interesting, flex space is back to pre-pandemic. So there's clearly something addressable here. where people are looking for somewhere to go. Now, WeWork is primarily in big cities, so a lot of the people who are going to those offices are people who are living in a small apartment who need to get out of their apartment, right? Like I got the dog, the whatever, my kids, whatever, they got to get out of the office, and they're able to temporarily touch down in these places, and it's been this very successful business model this far into the post-pandemic.
So I'm going to change subject again. But pre-COVID, you said that office was at like a 73% occupancy. What is your prediction for, are we going to get back to that level of having everybody come back to office?
So, last statistic is to get boring. So, Austin's at 60%, although we live in New Jersey, it's kind of irrelevant, but it's Austin's at 60%, San Francisco's at 40%. I'm not sure I understand exactly why. I think the only thing I could think of would be a commuting thing, right? I don't know, right, as to why there's such a discrepancy in occupancy, and I think it basically lends itself to, it's a crazy time in a crazy world, and there's no right answer to this thing. So to try to be able to predict would be difficult, but like I said, I think somewhere in between today and the 70, maybe your mid-50s, a little bit higher, is probably right. And that's only about half the time. So even if we go from 40 in New York, 47 to 55, that's only about 2.5 days a week in your office, and that's probably where the thing levels out. In between management 5, employee 2 or 0, and 2.5 kind of sounds right.
Rebecca, what about how many days do you hear from employees? Do they actually want to be in the office? We did like a random poll at my office, and I was a hardcore 0 going to the office because it's like an hour away from me. So 0 for me, but some people were like, oh, I could definitely do 3, it's 4. What's the norm?
Right, and I think it's a good question because I think there is a distribution. I think you have the people, and I work with people, and actually like younger people in their early 20s who live in a small apartment in New York City. They want to get out of their house and be able to like focus outside of their house. So I have people on our team who they want to be 5 days, and we have people who want to be 0. So I think you have to really know your team and know your culture and know what you're trying to get out of work and being together. I think full teams going back 5 days is something of the past. I don't think we'll ever go back. I think we've unlocked how enriching it can be to work from home and not have a commute or be able to focus on family. Like, I think there's no going back to what it was like 2019 and prior. But I do think it's going to balance out. I think the pendulum really swung one way where companies were starting and not even having an office. I work with a lot of early stage companies that are fully distributed, no office, no plans to have an office. I think that's going to be of this era, and if we look to the future, you won't see that many companies being fully distributed. I think it's going to kind of settle in, that people will have a central gathering place to gather, if not weekly, on like a monthly or quarterly basis for that really enriching in-person relationship building. But to like precisely answer your question, I think 2 to 3 days would be where people will settle in.
And David, let's talk about this modern office. Like you said, retail had to pivot and come back from dead. Office was doomed dead when COVID happened, right? The office buildings are going to close down. They're becoming dinosaur buildings. They're going to be renovated and turned into industrial. But we need office space. Are they changing offices to be like destination zones? And like, I know Bell Works is one that you can do everything from your office space. You can have a post office, laundry, whatever you need. You can do laps, play basketball. So are you seeing some of the office buildings transitioning and renovating for the new?
So I think with retail the same thing happened. So the paradigm shift now has completely, well, it was going that way and it completely shifted. So the Class A trophy buildings, like across like Hudson Yards, as we can see like from here, and World Trade, historically high rents. So very different than what I'm describing on occupancy. It's historically high. Trophy assets have never been hotter, and any real estate person you speak to all say the same thing. They've never seen a market is on fire as Class A trophy office. The same conversation can't be had for what we call Class B, which is kind of the average stuff, back office, et cetera, type of space. And that's a market that's going to have to redefine itself and figure it out. And to your end, the reason why is people are going to take less space because we need less seats. But we're going to reinvest and make it nicer. We want the good stuff. Like, who wants to go back to a crummy office with old furniture? What's going to bring me back is the trophy nice spot. And from a company, I can rationalize it because I'm going to take half as much space, and it's going to cost me the same. So that's the shift in motion happening across most industries. There's a couple outliers, but to your end, and then the last thing with the amenities, all of these buildings, the former Class A buildings that need to be A+ now, have all doubled down and reinvested tons of money into amenities. Like you said, even in New York, where you see indoor basketball courts, the exercise thing, all of these high-end things to attract people back. It's real time, it's happening. And if you make the investment, they've been able to secure the companies to move into their buildings.
Can I just add on to that? I think formerly all those amenities were to keep people at work so they wouldn't leave. Now I think those amenities are bringing people to gather and socialize when they're feeling lonely at home.
And let me ask about the health aspect of going back to work. Are people concerned anymore about going in and getting COVID, getting the new strain? I've asked a few people, and we're not afraid to gather anymore. We're boosted, vaxxed, and everything, but we are going out more. We like to see our colleagues and friends. Is that the general consensus out there?
Yeah, and the COVID policy at work is honestly a topic that I got pretty fatigued about, because I've been asked even to be that person at my office, which I don't know if that's the right answer or that's like the healthy answer, but it is. I think people are tired of the topic and they are ready to gather and be together again. And I think we know enough about our own bodies and symptoms, and we've created these norms where it's like, if you feel sick, stay home and just use really good judgment. But that's my worldview. But I know it can be very polarizing. Some people are very extreme, still very conservative and uncomfortable and wanting testing and vaccination cards, and other pockets are just over it, ready to risk it if that's what it means to get back to our life.
So really, it's varies depending on the employer, varies depending on the structure that is laid out, and I guess it's going to vary depending on what's going on in our own environment at the time.
Right, and I think for HR teams, it's hard because you're having to constantly revisit and reimagine policies and then reintroduce them to your workforce and hold people compliant. It's a lot of change management for the teams that are on the front lines of having to handle at work.
How about setting up our buildings for the tech aspects? Is that something that when buildings are being renovated, refigured, do they have to add a lot more for the efficiency, for tech, for sustainability? Are we doing that?
Yeah, I mean, sustainability is a big thing, quality of air, all these modern buildings have that, right? So those are big buzzwords we hear about, airflow, intake, outtake, and so forth into the space, because wellness matters, right? It's another driver for companies to say, we're moving into a new building because it has state-of-the-art HVAC systems, which introduces fresh air from the outside at a higher level than other buildings. It's a huge buyer value, and again, as part of that CapEx, great question, landlords are also doubling down on that aspect of their buildings.
Thank you. We only have 2 minutes left, so I'd like to ask each of you to just maybe final thoughts. Rebecca?
Yeah, so people ask me, is the office dead? And so if I haven't made it clear, I'll be very explicit. I do not think the office is dead. I think there is a place for the office. And I think about it as when I went to college, I would go to the library, yes, to study, but also to gather, right? Sometimes I would say to my friends, I can't go to the library today because I actually have to study, And that's how I feel the workplace is. It is a place to gather with your peers who are doing similar things as you, but that there is a place at home for that deep thinking, independent work. And so the future, to me, needs to create a space for both.
David?
Yeah, no, I mean, not self-serving because I'm in the real estate business, But there's a place for the office. I mean, it makes sense. I think intuitively we all understand that, like, there's a place, right? It has to happen. And I just think it's critical. If I was a young person working like in this industry or any industry, to not have someone at work, to have a mentor, to have the relationships, like, you build real relationships at work, which bring you up the curve. And when people move companies, they bring you with them. And if they don't really know you, I don't know, that trade probably doesn't happen as often. So I think it's important. And what's better than a happy hour? You know, you can't get that in the living room, you know? So those are good things like that come out of this. So look forward to the future work as it evolves.
Thank you both. It's been a great panel. I know we didn't get to touch on everything. You know, there's a lot of challenges out there. You know, onboarding new employees is one of them, and you know, harnessing and making everyone that does come into the office feel comfortable is, I think, maybe one of the biggest challenges out there. But you've both been great, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda.